Another freemen on the land type related case, you know, all this organised pseudo-commercial legal argument type stuff. It's quite a sad one really, but it raises an interesting point that a lot of sovereign citizens and freemen on the land use, which is, are humans persons as far as the law is concerned? I mean, spoiler alert, yes they are. But let me explain the argument. This was quite a sad case. It was a dispute, a family dispute, and it was who should look after a child. And the court took the view that the mother wasn't a fit and proper person to look after the child. So they made an order that pending further investigation, the child was to live with the father. But the mother and child went AWOL. They were eventually tracked down, and she was living with a group that effectively is based on all this freemen on the land, sovereign citizen type stuff. You know, they don't contract with the, you know, the state and all this sort of thing. But they actually live it as an entire lifestyle. But anyway, the child was taken into care and returned to the father. So the mother brought a writ of habeas corpus, and I'll link at the end to my video on habeas corpus, but effectively saying, give the child back to me. But her argument was this. The proceedings were brought under the Children's Act, and the Children's Act states at section 105 subsection 1, child means a person under the age of 18. But her argument was this, and this is one that a lot of freemen on the land use. The Interpretation Act 1978, Schedule 1 says that person includes a body of persons corporate or unincorporate. So her argument there was, well, the Interpretation Act says, as far as the law is concerned, person just means corporations. And that was her argument. So she said the entire act is invalid because it defines a child as something, as a person, and they're not people. So you have no powers whatsoever to, you know, take these actions. The Children Act is invalid because children aren't persons. And this went to court. And the court said this, and they refer to something called Benyon, Bailey and Norbury on statutory interpretation, which is one of these legal textbooks. And that stated, while the definition appearing in the Interpretation Acts makes it clear that person includes bodies of persons, they do not otherwise affect the width of the term, which must therefore be given its ordinary meaning. In other words, what do most people think person means? Persons are humans. And they say the reason for that is acts are normally drafted on the basis that person covers companies and other bodies of persons as well as natural persons, and natural persons is, you know, the legal term for humans. The definition in the Interpretation Act makes it unnecessary to mention companies or other bodies separately on each occasion. So that's the only reason it's there. It's just saying when you say persons, that includes corporate persons, corporations, because incorporation means to give something a body, and the whole purpose of incorporation is the body can act in its own right. It's not just the individuals in that body. So a company can enter into contracts on its own behalf. A company can sue and be sued in its own name. It's all, that's the whole point about it. And the court said this, the reference in the Interpretation Act to person including a body of persons, corporate or unincorporate, is not intended to limit the ordinary meaning of the word by excluding human beings, but rather to include in the definition a class, namely a body of persons, corporate or unincorporate, who, on the ordinary meaning of the word, would not otherwise be within the class. So that's what they're saying. They're saying, look, person, everybody knows person just means human person, but also the law allows companies to have legal personhood. And don't get me started about animal personhood, you know, that's one of my big bugbears. But they're saying the only reason it says, you know, it says includes, it doesn't say only is, it just says includes. So the argument is, the Interpretation Act is saying, yeah, persons are human persons, but also the definition of person includes, in addition to human persons, corporations. So when people say, the law just says persons are corporations. No, it doesn't. This case makes quite clear, and they adopt all those definitions. And as they say, common sense alone would tell one that where an act was introduced as an act to reform the law relating to children, unquote, with the welfare of the child under 18 stated to be a paramount consideration, the definition of a child as a person under the age of 18 must inevitably, and could only be by reference to the ordinary meaning of the word. So there you go. I mean, like I say, it's all a bit sad really, because this is somebody else who has lost their child. I mean, there are going to be future hearings about this, but the court expressed the view that they were very concerned that she was living in effectively, a cult, and what other influences might they have on her. So there you go, a salutary tale. But now when people say, the law says persons are only corporations, you can point to both the definition in the Interpretation Act, but this specific case that addresses that point. So clearly, as far as the law is concerned, person means human, as well as corporations. And of course, some of us are trying to make it animals. There's been interesting stuff about AI and artificial intelligence and whether, AI can have personhood. So there's lots to talk about there. Speaking of which, like as always, hope you found that vaguely useful, vaguely interesting. If you did, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, all that sort of thing. Where am I today? I'm at a place called Old Key, Key-E-A. And it's interesting because this was a village that when the economics changed and they realised that they'd actually make a lot more money being nearer to the road between Truro and Falmouth, they literally just up sticks and moved the entire village and re-established themselves. But they took the name with them. So it's still, the new village is called Key as well. But they didn't want to call it New Key in case it got confused with New Key, Newkuay. So this became known as Old Key, and this is the old abandoned church. There was just a tower left now. And for once, I'm not going to do my sneaking inside and filming inside, because I noticed that at least two of the big things off the corners that used to be there are no longer there. So they've come down quite recently. So I'm definitely staying outside the fence line for this one.